Hello. Hello, students of Matyom 1. My name is Robert. I come from the United States of America. Today I would like to talk to you about family. Okay, let's talk about family. What is family? Your immediate family is your mother, your father, you, your brothers, and your sisters. That is your immediate family. Mother, father, sons, and daughters. Okay? Boys are sons, girls are daughters. Okay? Now, when we talk about a family tree, we call it a family tree because your family, I should have the board this way. Anyway, your family is up here. You have your great-great-grandmother, great-great-grandfather, great-great-grandmother, great-great-grandfather. They have children. And these will be your great-grandmother, great-grandfather, great-grandmother, great-grandfather. And they have children. And they are your grandmother and your grandfather. And they have children. And they are your mother and your father. So then comes you and you. Okay, you and you, a boy and a girl. You marry or become together, either by marriage or live together, and you have children. Okay? Those are your children. Your sons, if they are boys, your daughters, if they are girls. And that is your immediate family. Mom, dad, boys and girls, children. Then, I should have drawn this differently. So here's you, and here's you over here. Now you're a boy, you get a girl. You have children.
Nobody.
Yes. And here's another girl. She gets a boy and they have children. Okay. Those are your children. Now, when you get older and your children grow up, they marry and have children. Those children are your grandchildren. Okay? And then, as they get older and have children, these are your great grandchildren. And then one more generation is your great-great grandchildren. Every generation, you add another great or grand. Great means big, grand means big. Great and grand are closely related. We will talk about that. So as you can see, you are here and you are here. You're like the trunk of the tree. And all the branches come out and all the leaves are different parts of your family, just like parts of a tree. And here's your tree. You are the tree here. Here are the generations, the people of your family that came before you yesterday, a long time ago. Today, here you are. Tomorrow, you get married and have children. Those are like the roots of the tree. The new parts of the tree. So here is the old parts of the tree. Here is you. And here is the new parts of the tree. The roots. The young ones. The young ones. The young ones. So, we have a little problem with our whiteboard. Okay. So, the main two words that we are concerned with today are great and grand. Grand comes first, and great comes after. So first is grand, and then is great. Grand, number one. Great, number two. Great, number three. Or great, grand. Sometimes people say great, grand. I say great. So your mother Okay. You have a mother and father. Maybe your father has brothers and sisters. Maybe your mother has brothers and sisters. Your father's brothers and sisters and your mother's brothers and sisters are called your aunts and uncles. If your mother has a brother, he is your uncle. If your father has a brother, he is your uncle. If your mother has a sister, she is your aunt. If your father has a sister, She is your aunt. Your mother and father's sisters are your aunts. Your mother and father's brothers are your uncles. Okay? Now, when your father or mother's brothers or sisters have children, what are they to you? What are your father's brothers' children? What are your father's sisters' children? What are your mother's brothers' children? What are your mother's sisters' children? Remember, your mother and father's sisters and brothers are your aunts and uncles. Okay? Now, when your aunts and uncles have children, those children are your cousins. Okay, I don't know if you can read that. It's a small whiteboard. Your mother and father's sisters and brothers' children are your cousins. Okay? Now, let's say your father does not have any brothers or sisters. This is true with me. My father is an only child. My grandmother and grandfather had one son, my father. So, do I have any cousins on my father's side? No, because my father does not have any brothers and sisters. So I have no cousins on my father's side. However, my father does have cousins because his father had several brothers and sisters. And they all had children. So they were my father's aunts and uncles, his father's children, his aunts and uncles had children, so they were his cousins. They are his cousins. But they are not my cousins. I do not have any cousins because my father is an only child. So those, my father's cousins, are my first cousins once removed. It gets very difficult. You have first cousins, second cousins, third cousins. So no cousins for Teacher Robert on my father's side, because he was an only son. Now, on my mother's side, my mother was one of 4 daughters. My mother had 3 sisters, 4 girls, and my grandmother and grandfather on my mother's side. 4 girls. So I have 3 aunts, my mother's sisters. So their children are what? My mother's sisters or brothers' children are my cousins. right? My cousins. So I do have cousins on my mother's side because she had 3 sisters. So those children are my cousins. Okay. And then when those children have children, they will become my second cousins and third cousins. That's how it goes, okay? All right. Now, let's go back and talk about your sister and your brother, okay? Okay. Now, when your sister or brother has a child, what is that child? Is that your cousin? No. Your cousins are your aunts and uncles' children. Your brother or sister's children are your nieces and nephews. If she is a girl, she is your niece. Niece. If he is a boy, he is your nephew. Okay? Girl, niece, boy, nephew. Your brother's son and daughter are your nephew and niece. Son, nephew, daughter, niece. Your sister's children. The girls are your nieces. The boys are your nephews. So brother, sister, children, niece, nephew. Okay. Niece, nephew, your brother's children. So, if you are here and you have a boy and a girl and a boy and a girl, you have 2 boys and 2 girls, okay? You and your wife. Now your sister is over here. And she has 1 boy and 2 girls. Okay? So here's you. And here's your sister. So you have 2 boys and 2 girls. Your sister has 1 boy and 2 girls. What are these boys and girls to each other? They are cousins. They are cousins. My mom has a son and a daughter. We are sister and brother. My mom's sister has 2 girls and 2 boys. They are my cousins. Okay? Then when they have children, they become your second cousins and like that. Okay, now let's go before that, yesterday, a long time ago, maybe. Here's your father, and here's your mother. Okay. Your father had a mother and father, and your mother had a mother and father. Your father's mom and dad are your grandmother and grandfather. This is where that grand comes in. So this is grand. Grand. Okay? Your grandmother, grandfather, grandmother, grandfather. Now, each of them had a mother and father, and mother and father. This is where the tree part comes in that I was telling you about. Each of these have a mother and father. Mother, father. Now here is where we put great. Your mother and father, your grandmother and grandfather, and their parents are your great grand, great grand, great grandmother, and great grandfather. Okay? The next generation, the next life before that, is your great great grandmother and grandfather. So it goes father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, great grandfather, great grandmother, and then great great grandfather and great great grandmother. One great more for each level. Okay? And going down to the roots of the tree. Remember we talked about roots? It goes the same way. Same as up. You got mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, great grandmother, great grandfather, great great grandmother, great great grandfather. You remember your mothers or fathers, brothers and sisters are your aunts and your uncles. The women are your aunts, the men are your uncles. When we get to grandfather and grandmother, their sisters and brothers are your great uncles and great aunts or aunts. Aunts or aunts. Aunts, UK, British, English is aunts. In America, sometimes they say aunts or aunts. They are both correct. I grew up saying aunts, the British way, even though I'm American. Okay. So, your mother and father, sisters and brothers are your aunts and uncles. Your grandmothers and grandfathers, sisters and brothers are your great uncles and great aunts. Then when you go to your great grandmother and great grandfathers, sisters and brothers, they are your great great uncles and great great aunts. So great uncles and great aunts come from your grandmother and grandfather. Great great uncles and great great aunts come from your great grandmother and great grandfather. You add one great for every generation, okay? It's difficult, I know. So when we go the other way, the younger people, the roots of the trees, your children, your children's children, it goes the same way. You have you, and you have your children, and then when your children have children, those are your grandchildren. One word, one long word, grandchildren. Grandchildren, one word. Now when your grandchildren have children, those are your great grandchildren. Two words, put a hyphen between, great grandchildren. Those are your grandchildren's children, great grandchildren. Your children's children are grandchildren. So the first one is always grand, okay? And after that, we put one great in front of the grand for every next generation. Great grandchildren. Great, great grandchildren. Three words. Great, great grandchildren. We put a little hyphen between each one there. Okay. This whiteboard is a little small and a little dirty, but you can see how it is like a tree. You have great great grandfather, great grandfather, grandfather, father, you, your son, your grandson, your great grandson, your great great grandson. We just put one more great word for each generation, each family in itself. A family is a mother and father and children, and grandparents also. But your how can I say this? Okay, you get the idea, I think. Okay, grand, then great grand, and then great great grand. Well, how is this important? Well, maybe some of you have heard of the Titanic, the big ship. They made a movie about it. The ship was built in Belfast, Ireland in 1910. I think it first set sail in 1912, I believe. It was over 100 years ago. So, I know that my great-grandfather was a carpenter. A carpenter, if you know, works with wood, right? A carpenter works with wood. Cuts wood, makes things out of wood, houses, buildings, ships, okay? Carpenter works with wood. So my great-grandfather, I know, was a carpenter who made the beautiful wood on the Titanic, okay? But I'm not sure if it was my great-grandfather or my great-great-grandfather. Well, how do we know this? Well, let's find out. My father was born in 1939, which by a Buddhist calendar is 2482 Thai calendar. My father was born in 1939. His father, my grandfather, was born in 1910. So how old was my grandfather when my father was born? He was 29 years old. 29 or 30, depending on birthday, but about 29 years old. So you can kind of guess people usually have children between the ages of 20 and 40. Usually. Probably more like 20 and 30, but some have children later. So, if my great-grandfather, my father was born in 1939, his father was 29 years old when he was born, so he was born in 1910. So my great-grandfather, if he was, say, 25 years old, then he would have been born in 1885, okay? If my great-grandfather was 25 years old when my grandfather was born, then my great-grandfather was born in 1885. So my great-great-grandfather, if he was 25 when his son was born, then he was born in 1860. Okay? Now, the Titanic was built between 1910 and 1912, around then, right around 1910. So my grandfather was a baby, so he did not work on the Titanic. He was just a baby. So my great-grandfather would have been 25 years old. So it may have been my great-grandfather that worked on the Titanic. Then again, my great-great-grandfather would have been about 50 years old. So he may have been the one that worked on the Titanic. Back then, people did not live to be too old. About 60 years is about all they lived back then. Today, with modern technology, modern medicine, people live longer. So looking at this, who worked on the Titanic in my family? Probably my great-grandfather when he was 25 years old and had my grandfather. Okay? So that's how you can use the family tree to find out things about your very own family. Now, I am going to bring up another topic. If you can read that, called in-laws. What are in-laws? Your family is your blood. Your blood. The blood from your mother and father make you. Even from your grandmother and grandfather make you. You probably look somewhat like your father. You probably look somewhat like your mother. Or sometimes it skips a generation and you may look like your grandfather or your grandmother. Me, I look just like my father. But inside, my brain, my heart, all the inside parts of my body are like my mother. Okay, so that's how it worked with me. Now my sister looks like my father also. My sister is tall and thin like my father. But inside, she is also like my father. My sister is very much like my father. I am like my father and my mother. But I have my grandfather's eyes, my mother's father's eyes. So things like that happen. So anyway, family is blood. You came from your mother and father by blood, okay? In-laws come from marriage, not blood, okay? So, so your sister marries a man. He is her husband. She is his wife. But this is your sister. So what is your sister's husband? Your sister's husband is your brother-in-law. Okay, your brother's wife is your sister-in-law. In-law simply means by marriage, not by blood. Not by blood, okay? Your sister and brother are by blood. Your sister-in-law or brother-in-law is by marriage. They are your sister-in-law because they married your brother. They are your brother-in-law because they married your sister. How about your wife or your husband? What are your husband or wife's mother and father to you? They are not your mother and father. They are your wife's mother and father, or your husband's mother and father. So, they are your mother-in-law and your father-in-law. They are not your mother and father, but they are your wife's or your husband's mother and father, so they are your mother-in-law and your father-in-law. So anything that comes from marriage and not from blood is your in-law. And you can have cousins-in-law, uncles-in-law. It just means they are not from blood, they are from marriage. Okay? Okay. We covered quite a bit about family today. I hope that you learned something. It's very complicated. A lot of people where I come from do not even know those names that I have been teaching you today. We'll be going over it again soon. Nice to meet you. I'm anxious to meet you once school opens up again after this last coronavirus outbreak. Until then, please stay home, stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you in school. Have a great day. Bye-bye.